The industrial shredder screamed. It was a cold, metallic hunger. Julian was on his knees. His tailored trousers were ruined on the marble. He ignored the blood on his hands. He was clawing at the floor. He tried to grab the ribbons of his black card. The plastic was dead. The magnetic strip was shredded. He looked like a beggar in a tuxedo. He didn't know the erasure had just begun. 20 minutes ago, the air in the executive lounge was thick with arrogance. Julian stood at the center. He was a king of glass. His voice boomed. It was the unearned confidence of a thief. He held a flute of vintage champagne. He looked at Audrey behind the mahogany desk. "You are a glorified maid, Audrey," he barked. "I don't pay 5,000 a night to see your peasant face. Delete my $3 million debt, now, or I will throw you back to the gutter." The room was full of vultures. Lady Kensington sat nearby. She adjusted her pearls. She looked at Audrey with pure disgust. Audrey's shoes were scuffed. Her uniform was old. Lady Kensington whispered to her friend, "Why do they let people like her breathe the same air as us?" Julian heard her. He grinned. He leaned over the desk. The clicking of his heavy gold watch was a countdown. Audrey didn't blink. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She had hidden his crimes for 3 years. She was the ghost in his machine. Julian lost his patience. He flicked his wrist. The champagne erupted. It was a cold, sticky wave. It drenched Audrey's blazer. The liquid dripped from her chin. It soaked into her skin. "You look better like this," Julian sneered. "Drowned. Like the nobody you are." Lady Kensington laughed. She took a photo. She wanted to show the board how the help was failing. The lounge doors thudded open. The vibration hit the floorboards. Silas walked in. The air turned to ice. Every billionaire in the room stood up. They didn't speak. They didn't move. Silas was a wall of pure authority. The sharp strike of his leather shoes was the only sound. He didn't look at the crowd. He walked straight to Audrey. He didn't offer a towel. He pulled a black titanium badge from his coat. It was matte and heavy. He pinned it to Audrey's wet lapel. The metal hit the silk with a sharp thud. Silas's voice was a low, resonant rumble. "Audrey is the head of global audit. From this second, her word is the final law. If she says you are a debtor, you are a ghost." The silence was a weapon. Lady Kensington dropped her glass. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. She looked at the badge. Her face went gray. She scrambled toward Audrey. "Audrey, darling, let me help you with that blazer," she stammered. Her voice was thin and desperate. She tried to touch Audrey's arm. She was a dog begging for a scrap. Audrey didn't look at her. She felt Silas's hand on her waist. It was a firm, heavy claim. His touch was cold and absolute. Audrey turned to the screen. Her fingers danced. One sharp click. The hidden status on Julian's account died. The red warning light began to pulse. It was a digital heartbeat. "Pay for the champagne, Julian," Audrey said. Her voice was a calm execution. "The lounge bill is $42,000, including the vintage you poured on my floor." Julian lunged for his wallet. He pulled out the black card. He slammed it onto the reader. The machine let out a long, discordant beep. Transaction declined. Fraudulent credentials. Julian's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text notification lit up the screen. "You have been removed from the elite founders group." His friends were gone. His network was a void. Silas leaned down. His lips brushed Audrey's ear. The sound of his steady, heavy breathing filled her head. He ignored Julian. He ignored the room. "Take it all, Audrey," he whispered. The sound was a dark promise. I want to hear the bones of his reputation snap. Silas looked at the guards. "Bring the shredder," he commanded. "He needs to see what happens to ghosts." Julian's face was a mask of shock. He looked at the crowd. No one moved. No one helped. Lady Kensington turned her back. She was already deleting his number. Julian was alone. The shredder began to growl. It was time to feed the machine. The grand lobby was a vault of obsidian. The air was thin and cold. The sound of the elevator was a sharp electronic chime. It felt like a countdown. Julian was still on the floor. He was a mess of expensive wool and broken pride. Every billionaire in the lobby watched. They held their breath. They didn't want the filth to touch their shoes. The heavy rotating doors hissed. A man in a charcoal overcoat stepped inside. This was Marcus. He was the head of global compliance. His briefcase was a coffin for reputations. Julian saw him and let out a strangled cry. Marcus! Thank God! He screamed. His voice cracked. It was a shrill, desperate sound. This girl is a thief. She's hacking the system. Tell them who I am. Julian reached out with his bleeding fingers. He tried to grab Marcus's coat. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't even look down. He stopped 3 feet away. The silence was absolute. I'm not here for her, Julian, Marcus said. His voice was as dry as parchment. I'm here for the $3.8 million. Julian froze. The color drained from his lips. $3.8 million? That's a mistake. The board approved my offsets. Audrey stepped forward. Her heels clicked against the marble. It was a rhythmic, lethal sound. She held a thin tablet. The screen was a glow of cold blue data. There are no offsets, Julian, she said. Her voice was a sharp blade. I've stopped the manual hiding. The system has recalculated your life. Every steak, every bottle of champagne, every night in the royal suite. It was never free. It was stolen. Lady Kensington stood by the fountain. She was recording the scene on her gold iPhone. She used to call Julian the prince of the hotel. Now she whispered to the manager. Make sure his debt doesn't affect my loyalty points, she said. She didn't look at Julian. She looked at him like he was a stain on the carpet. Julian lunged at Audrey. You bitch, you ruined me. He was a wild animal. He didn't get close. Silas appeared from the shadows. He didn't strike Julian. He didn't need to. He caught Julian's wrist in midair. The sound of Julian's bones straining was audible. Silas's grip was a vice of pure power. He didn't even look at the man he was crushing. His eyes were on Audrey. Silas moved closer. He pulled Audrey back against his chest. The heat of his body was a heavy, aggressive claim. He was a wall of muscle and authority. He leaned down. His lips were an inch from her ear. His voice was a low, vibrating rumble. This is the part where the trash gets sorted, Audrey. Do you want to watch, or do you have more assets to reclaim? The sound of his breathing was the only thing Audrey could hear. It was steady. It was dangerous. Audrey tapped a final command. A loud, sharp ping echoed through the lobby. Julian's portrait was on the wall of honor. Now it vanished. The screen flickered. A red scrolling banner appeared in its place. Credit warning, access denied, identity under audit. It was a public execution. The socialites in the lobby stepped back. They didn't want to be near a ghost. Julian fell back into the fountain. The water drenched his suit. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the crowd. No one helped. No one spoke. Marcus opened his briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of legal papers. These are the seizure orders, Julian, Marcus said. Your assets are frozen. Your name is a red flag in every bank in the city. Audrey looked at Julian. He was shivering in the cold water. You didn't bring prestige to this hotel, Julian, she said. Her voice was devoid of emotion. That is the ultimate insult. You were a line of bad code, and I just hit delete. Silas tightened his grip on her waist. His fingers were cold and possessive. Lead the way, Audrey, he whispered. The sound was a dark, private promise. This hotel is no longer your workplace. It is your hunting ground. I am just here to make sure no one stops the kill. He turned her away from the wreckage. He didn't look back. Julian was left in the water, screaming at a room that had already forgotten his name. The elevator rose. The silence was heavy. It was a pressurized vault. The doors hissed open at the top floor. Julian lunged for the mahogany doors of the presidential suite. His breathing was a jagged rattle. This is my home, he screamed. His voice was shards of broken glass. You can't lock me out of my own life. He slammed his thumb onto the biometric scanner. The machine emitted a flat red tone. Access denied. User deleted. Audrey stepped out of the elevator. Her movements were fluid. She held the black tablet like a weapon. One swipe of her thumb. The digital lock hissed. The heavy bolt slid into place with a sound like a guillotine. Thud. Your life was a line of code, Julian, she said. Her voice was a cool strike, and I just hit delete. Julian whirled around. His face was a mask of sweat. He pulled a heavy gold card from his pocket. It was his gym and spa membership. It was his last shield in this social circle. I have a lifetime contract, he shrieked. You can't touch this. I am a founder. The staff stood at the end of the hall. They were the people Julian had spat on for years. They didn't look away now. They watched the king fall. They saw the fraud. Silas moved. He was a shadow of pure power. He pulled Audrey back against the solid heat of his chest. His hand was firm on her waist. It was a possessive claim, the cold metal of his watch, pressed against her skin. It was a reminder of the empire he owned. Break it, Silas commanded. His voice was a low-frequency rumble. Audrey felt it in her own throat. She took the gold card from Julian's shaking fingers. She didn't use a tool. She snapped the thick plastic with a sharp, lethal twist. Crack. The sound echoed off the mahogany walls. Julian flinched as if he had been shot. He looked at the pieces on the carpet. His network was gone. I want you to understand, Julian, Audrey whispered. She stepped into his space. She tapped the screen of her tablet. Thousands of lines of red text scrolled by. Every business deal you closed was a lie. Every investor you met here happened because I boosted your credit rating. I did it every Tuesday at 4 p.m. I didn't just hide your debt. I manufactured your glory. You were my project. Now the project is closed. Julian's eyes went wide. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, his heels caught on the plush rug. His phone began to vibrate in his pocket. It was a frantic, buzzing death knell. He pulled it out. A notification from the National Credit Bureau lit up the hall. Status blacklisted. Assets seized. The rage died. The pride vanished. In its place was a hollow, soul-crushing terror. Julian didn't just fall. He collapsed. He dropped to his knees. His forehead hit the marble border of the carpet. Thump. Please, Audrey, he choked out. The sound of his tears was a soft, rhythmic patter on the stone. I'm sorry. I'll do anything. Just fix the data. Give me back 24 hours. Just one day to move my money. He reached out to grab the hem of her trousers. Silas's boot moved first. He stepped firmly on Julian's hand. The sound of Julian's muffled cry was the only music Audrey wanted to hear. Silas didn't look down. He leaned into Audrey's ear. His lips brushed her skin. His steady, heavy breathing was the only sound in her world. He's begging, Audrey, Silas whispered. His voice was a dark, gravelly rasp. Does it sound the way you imagined? He didn't wait for an answer. He tightened his grip on her waist. His fingers dug into the silk of her blouse. Tell the guards to bring the bins, Silas said. His eyes were cold. It's time to clear out the trash. The presidential suite needs a new occupant. Someone who actually owns the air they breathe. The heavy revolving doors hissed for the final time. They spat Julian out into the biting midnight air. The wind was a cold, sharp blade. It tore through his sweat-soaked shirt. He stumbled onto the wet sidewalk. His knees hit the concrete with a dull, wet thud. Thwack! Behind him, the gold-leafed entrance of the Grand Celestial glowed like a fortress. He was no longer a citizen of that world. He was a trespasser. The low, heavy rumble of a diesel engine vibrated through the pavement. A massive industrial garbage truck pulled up to the curb. Its hydraulic lift groaned in the silence. Two men in dark uniforms began hurling leather suitcases out of the service entrance. Julian let out a strangled, breathless cry. Those are my bespoke suits, he shrieked. My watches, my entire life is in those bags. The sound of the truck's metal jaws closing was a rhythmic, bone-crushing screech. Grind, crunch. The velvet-lined cases were flattened in seconds. Their contents were reduced to unrecognizable shrapnel, silk ties tangled in coffee grounds, gold cufflinks crushed under rotting food. Julian lunged for the back of the truck. A security guard caught him by the collar. He threw Julian back onto the pavement like a bag of salt. Audrey stepped out onto the granite steps. The cold wind whipped her hair across her face. She didn't look like the quiet manager anymore. She looked like the architect of a new world. Silas stood directly behind her. His large, heavy wool coat was draped over her shoulders. The warmth from the fabric was a silent, aggressive shield. He reached around her. His fingers were cold and steady. They slid over her hand as she held the final execution order on the tablet. Sign it, Audrey, Silas whispered. His voice was a dark, gravelly vibration against her spine. Make the void permanent. Audrey's finger moved across the screen. One sharp, decisive swipe. Click. With that single motion, Julian's name was purged from the global registry. He wasn't just broke, he was unidentifiable. No credit, no history, no existence in the circles of power. He was a ghost haunting a sidewalk. The valets who used to bow to Julian now looked through him. They adjusted their gloves. They opened car doors for guests who actually had a pulse in the system. Julian scrambled toward the steps. His fingers clawed at the stone. Audrey, please, he begged. His voice was a pathetic whimper. You can't just erase me. I'm someone. People know me. He reached out to grab her shoe. Silas stepped forward. His heavy leather boot came down inches from Julian's face. The sound of the heel hitting the stone was like a gunshot. Crack. Silas didn't look down. He didn't acknowledge the shadow at his feet. He simply tightened his grip on Audrey's waist. He pulled her closer until there was no air between them. The garbage truck let out a final, triumphant hiss. It drove away, taking every physical trace of Julian's vanity with it. The street was empty. Only the man screaming at the closed doors remained. Audrey turned away. She didn't feel pity. She felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a ledger finally balanced. Silas guided her back toward the private, gold-trimmed elevator. The doors of the elevator opened with a soft, melodic chime. Silas pressed a heavy, cold titanium key into Audrey's palm. His thumb lingered over her pulse point. "This is yours now," he said. His voice was a low, private rumble. The penthouse, the registry, the power, everything. He stepped into the elevator with her. His presence was a crushing weight of authority. As the doors slid shut, the last thing Audrey saw was Julian standing alone in the dark. He was a nameless shadow shivering in the wind. The elevator ascended in total, predatory silence. The elevator rose in a pressurized silence. It made Audrey's ears pop. Inside the mirrored box, Silas didn't move. His presence filled every cubic inch of the air. The heavy vibration of the motor was the only sound. It stood between them and the absolute stillness of the top floor. Silas reached out. His hand was large and calloused. He slid it under the heavy wool coat on Audrey's shoulders. His fingers brushed her neck. His skin was a steady, burning heat. The doors slid open with a soft chime. The penthouse was a cathedral of obsidian and glass. It overlooked the city lights Julian once thought he owned. Silas walked her toward the massive desk in the center. "This isn't just a suite, Audrey," he said. His voice was a low, gravelly resonance. It vibrated through her heels. "This is the nervous system of the empire. Julian was a parasite in the veins. You are the heartbeat." He pulled out the heavy leather chair. His touch was firm. He sat her in the seat of power. Audrey's fingers flew across the keyboard. The rhythmic clicking sounded like a firing squad. She wasn't just checking accounts. She was performing a systemic purge. Julian had 3 offshore accounts. They were linked to the hotel's procurement system. With one aggressive strike of the enter key, the screens turned red. The system's error alert was a short, sharp beep. It was the sound of a final kill. "He's trying to call his lawyer," Silas said. He glanced at a secondary monitor. Silas leaned over her, his chest pressed against her back. His arms caged her against the desk. The sound of his steady, heavy breathing was inches from her ear. He pulled a burner phone from his pocket. He tossed it onto the obsidian. The screen showed a live feed from the street. Julian was still there. He was a small, pathetic shadow under a bus stop. He was tapping at a dead phone. It would never connect again. The hotel's board of directors began to call. The private line buzzed with a frantic rhythm. They saw the data shift. They saw the king fall. Silas didn't answer. He turned the speaker on. "Silas, we had no idea about Julian's fraud," a voice pleaded. It was the chairman. He sounded like a frightened child. "We are ready to offer Audrey a full partner seat. Please tell her we apologize." Audrey didn't look at the phone. She opened the global blacklist. This was the list Julian used to threaten her. She highlighted his name. The glowing cursor hovered over permanent erasure. "For 3 years, he made me feel like I was invisible," she whispered. Her voice was steady. Her fingers were steel. Silas didn't take the mouse. He placed his heavy palm over her hand. His weight steadied her grip. "Make him a ghost, Audrey," Silas commanded. His voice was a dark promise. "Give him exactly what he gave you." Audrey clicked. The screen flashed white. Julian's profile was gone. A sterile gray prompt appeared. User not found. On the street below, Julian's phone went dark. He stared at the dead glass. He let out a silent scream. The city roar swallowed it. He didn't exist in the data. He didn't exist anywhere. Silas turned her chair around. The leather creaked. He didn't step back. He stood between her legs. His height forced her to look up into his cold eyes. He reached down. He unpinned the titanium badge from her blazer. His knuckles grazed her skin. "You don't need this to be the most powerful person here," Silas said. His voice dropped to a low, intimate rumble. "You are the only one I trust with the keys to my kingdom." He leaned in. The sound of his heavy breathing was the only thing Audrey could hear. He wasn't giving her a choice. He was claiming the space she had conquered. The city lights blurred as he pulled her up. His hands slid into her hair. He gripped it with a possessive intensity. "The ledger is closed, Audrey," he whispered. His lips were an inch from hers. "But our night is just beginning." The penthouse went silent as the blinds slid down. They were alone in the electric glow of the screens.
Seeing Julian shivering in the rain while his bespoke suits get crushed into literal trash is exactly the kind of social cleansing we all secretly crave. But it makes me wonder, if you had the power to digitally erase a person's entire existence, would you stop at their credit score? Or would you go for total erasure like Audrey did? Honestly, I spent way too much time listening to actual industrial shredder recordings just to make sure that first scene felt visceral. There's something terrifyingly final about the sound of a fake life turning into plastic confetti.